All right, it's been a fun first half of day 2 here at the Winter Championship in the Bahamas. We've seen some exciting matches in which world champion Pavel fell to LvGe. And Omega Zero, another player that was a favorite, fell in his match. What have been your thoughts on the first half of the day so far?
The play hasn't been quite as tight as I imagined it would have been, but for the most part, the matches have just been spectacular to watch. We've seen some crazy moments coming up. Green Sheep and Teray, of course, been hanging out all weekend long, organized a little handshake there. And this was a much quicker set than the rest of them have been today. These guys like to be aggressive. They like to get that damage going right away, and I'm hoping that pace continues. But it's, you know me, I love the aggro decks. But it's been a pleasure to watch today's games. Can't ask for much more from the diverse field of decks that we actually have this weekend.
They both left up Pirate Warrior.
Yeah.
And they both got to play it. What's up with that?
I think it's a pact between the two of them. Those guys love to get some damage in.
Yeah, they both love to play Pirate Warrior. Let's take a look at the bracket. This is Group C. The winner's match is going to be LvGe and DocPwn. That's going to be coming up in just a few moments, but a big deal there in the elimination match. It's going to be world champion Pavel versus a world champion participant from 2016, Yolsik. One of those guys is going to be going home today.
Yeah, I would consider both of those games in the top end slight upsets at the very least. I mean, the fact that we have 2 world champion competitors will be facing off, one of those guys going home. You know, not getting a repeat right away, still 2 more seasons to go, but really looking forward to that one. Pavel was looking good, and so was Yolsik in that one, but Omega Zero versus Samuel Sal, to me, this has been the big talking point of the day. Newcomer Samuel Sal, big underdog to Omega Zero, takes it in the 7-game set.
Yeah, I mean, that was a 3-hour series. We were in the casting desk there. It didn't feel like 3 hours.
Didn't.
Maybe the Dragon Priest mirror, but everything else didn't feel like 3 hours. You know. And it was exciting. Came all the way down to game number 7. Those are the kind of matches that we like, where you can see the players as sort of real people. You know, they were sometimes making some errors.
Yeah.
And, you know, being able to spot those and say, oh, does it come down to nerves? Are they forgetting cards? Are they fatigued because 3 players? But we'll have to see as the day goes on. We'll see those guys play later. But it's time to introduce the next match. It's going to be DocPwn versus LvGe. And the first player, please welcome to the stage from China, it's LvGe. And for his opponent from Canada, representing the Americas, it's DocPwn.
It's go time! LvGe versus DocPwn.
刚刚结束了和 Pavel 的比赛。
Before playing Pavel, I was very nervous. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. But once I started playing, I calmed down. I was quite pleased to win.
事实上，他已经
I have already chatted with the girl who sent Pavel the gift, and she congratulated me.
Playing LvGe, I'm gonna study his lineup a bit more in the next couple hours. I think he's favored to win against mine.
下一场对阵的对手
My next match is with DocPwn. He went 7-0 in the Swiss round in the Americas regional playoffs, so he is very strong and a skilled player.
I'm not too concerned with oh, he beat Pavel. I should be scared. No.
LvGe versus DocPwn. Ready, set, go!
East meets West. It's time for LvGe versus DocPwn, Canada versus China. My name is Foden. I'm joined by Brian Kibler, and together we're going to bring you guys the 5th match of today. The first, quite possibly one of the most important for Group C. We're going to find out which of these players is going on to the top 8, Brian.
Yeah, you know, this is a big match for both these players. These are all, frankly, big matches, big event for everyone. But both these players had, well, you know, what might be considered upsets in their first round. LvGe was able to take down the world champion in Pavel, while DocPwn, as the gentleman on the desk earlier mentioned, took down Yolsik, so also a competitor at the World Championship last year. We see these guys' lineups, as we see on the screen, they've got some differences, but a lot of similarities as well. We see Reno Lock and Dragon Priest in both lineups. And then a little bit more Jade-focused Shaman deck for LvGe, rather the mid-range for DocPwn. And then Jade Druid versus the Miracle Rogue is the big difference.
That's right. We'll see if that ends up coming into place here. DocPwn says he feels unfavored, but He's been saying that all weekend long. He's saying, you know what, I'm unfavored against everybody, at least on paper. I'm just going to go in and try to play my game. Let's go into game number 1. Mid-range Shaman versus Dragon Priest. It's a matchup that, you know, I tend to favor the Dragon Priest in terms of who I feel comfortable playing. That being said, you know, if you're able to stabilize, we've seen the Shaman pull out sometimes, being able to build up really big boards. DocPwn doesn't have the Jade version, so he's not as reliant on building his 8/8s and 9/9s late game, but he still has cards that can help him win if he's having a big board advantage, such as Aliku, one of them being it, and Bloodlust.
Yeah. One of the big things is that the mid-range Shaman deck, with cards like Bloodlust and cards like Thunderbolt Valiant, it relies much more heavily on having a board established than pure Jade Shaman does. Jade Shaman can, from nothing, just make an enormous 5/5 Jade Chieftain and another gigantic Jade. So it can more easily come back in situations where it is being dominated on board simply through the power of Jades themselves. Whereas the mid-range deck, because it relies on actually having a board to take advantage of a lot of those cards, is less powerful when it's playing from behind. So DocPwn will need to get on the board fairly quickly to keep up with the Dragon Priest.
Yeah, does have a way to get onto the board very quickly, but not much to follow it up. Coin Totem Golem, one of the strongest plays available in the current state of Hearthstone. At least for a few more weeks, maybe a month maximum. We'll find out when Ungoro comes and the Grand Tournament rotates to Wild.
It's interesting because coining out Totem Golem against Dragon Priest often will leave you with a minion that doesn't necessarily really get the job done, contesting what they're going to play on turn 2. Yes, you can kill a Netherspite Historian. That's not a huge deal. But if they were to play a Wormrest Agent, it's not going to actually kill it. You need to do a little bit of additional damage. He does have 2 Maelstrom Portals, so that can definitely be that additional damage, but he's going to overload himself here. And using his coin and getting overloaded for the next turn is a real cost in this matchup.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's worth thinking about, you know? But at the same time, I gotta feel like getting the board early on is not really a bad thing. Yes, you're vulnerable to Shadow Word Pain, but you know, all of a sudden your opponent's plays on the following turn also are very limited as well. You know, anything that they played for minion-wise is not going to be able to challenge Totem Golem.
Well, there is the Wormrest Agent drawn for LvGe, so he can threaten to kill the Totem Golem over 2 turns, and now DocPwn can attack into this, maybe use a Lightning Bolt here, because he doesn't need to, or rather he doesn't have the ability to punch through this by itself. He could just wait as well. He could just hold back, and maybe he Lightning Bolt Maelstrom Portals the following turn.
Yeah, the only danger, of course, is Cabal Talon Priest. That is a card that you want to be mindful of, and if you force your opponent to play it just as a 3-mana 3/4, you have the ability for yourself to really deny that value, because Priest does tend to want to play for tempo, and if they have only a Cabal Talon Priest to play, they tend to just play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know, as you just mentioned, the early game is very important in this matchup in general, because the mid-range Shaman deck does get a lot of value over establishing totems in the board, whether it be with the Thunderbolt Valiant or with Bloodlust or just with Flame Tongue Totem. In sort of the middle stages of the game, it's very important that they are able to actually keep those totems in play, and if they lose the board to even something as small as a Wormrest Agent, that could be a big problem. And DocPwn, he recognizes that. He wants to ensure there's no threat of the Talon Priest, and he can potentially get to the middle stage of the games with totems intact.
And, you know, another thing that's very important is he has to kind of figure out when to utilize the Lightning Bolt because of the way Overload works in the future turns. If he wants to Jade Lightning on 4, he's going to need to free up the most amount of mana. So in the event his opponent has a Talon Priest, he could answer with Maelstrom Portal. This is something that maybe throws people a little bit off, because Technician is sometimes a 1-of, maybe a 2-of in certain deck lists, and that's not something that you always want to see, especially on turn 3.
Right, exactly what you mentioned here. The Maelstrom Portal lines up very well against the most common 3-drop, but here LvGe does have that 1-of. He has the 1 Blackwing Technician here, and that really does make DocPwn's turn a lot worse. He rolls Spell Power. Ooh, LvGe just drawing 2-drop on 2, 4-drop on 4. So excellent pickups for the Chinese player here. But this is interesting too, because that Wrath of Air Totem, I was going to say Manatide Totem. Wrong one. Wrong shiny totem here. The Wrath of Air Totem is a real threat if he is to develop a wider board. Even double Maelstrom Portal or a potentially Lightning Storm could be a big problem. So he does decide to take that out rather than the Totem Golem.
Yeah, very, very rational response. Plus, it's also a free trade. We put that in quotation marks because you know, the Totem Golem was also a value trade yourself. But that way you don't have to worry too much about the health of your minions, so you're more vulnerable to 4 mana plays to you're available to your opponent. So DocPwn now has to kind of balance his hand. He's got all spells, no minions. I mean, he has spells that generate minions, but he has to also keep in mind the overload, which is interesting how to balance here. Do you see? Is there any play that sticks out to you immediately, Brian, as probably his best chance to fight back for board?
It's really awkward here, and a lot of this has to do with again the importance of the early game from the priest. The priest really has the massive advantage in terms of the size of its minions at this stage of the game, and the shaman really needs to get to the later stages where it's able to leverage spell power plus these spells in hand in order to actually take down these big minions. He could attack in and use either Lightning Bolt or Jade Lightning. Here, he really needs to try to get some of these bigger minions off the board, simply because if he's able to give LvGe the ability to hero power them and preserve them there, it ends up giving away a lot of value as well as tempo.
And of course, you're also keeping in mind what's the plays that your opponent has. It seems like LvGe's been playing solely off the top of his deck. He'd play the Wormrest Agent off the draw. He played the Twilight Guardian off the draw as well, And then you're thinking, well, he's maybe holding some situational cards. That he's holding a dragon.
Look at his hand now.
Well, okay, all things considering, DocPwn has to be a little suspicious. Maybe he's holding some things like Blackwing Corruptor and other things that he has to be mindful of. So if he played Feral Spirits, he'd be lining up straight into the optimal turn 5 and could get blown out.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of blown out, this turn for DocPwn is a mess.
Yeah, this is kind of what a control mirror would look like in theory. Just all
got a bunch of removal
cards.
spells in my hand.
Yeah, no ability to pressure or end the game, but ability to control the board.
And I sort of want to think back to DocPwn chose to coin out the Totem Golem on turn 1, and obviously everything from the rest of the game has cascaded from there, but the ability to perhaps play Aya on a future turn is restricted because he did use that additional bonus mana very early.
Yeah, I mean, we know, of course, that that in this situation, DocPwn didn't really draw much substantially, but it's all about how you plan to play the matchup. And DocPwn played very aggressively. I don't actually think it was the wrong play in retrospect, but it just didn't happen to work out in this case. And now DocPwn has to kind of weigh if he's going to use
What
anything.
am I even doing here?
How am I going to set it for Aya? He doesn't want to actually overload in the case he does, because if he plays Feral Spirits, he only has 4 mana. If he has to Lightning Storm next turn, he's still not playing Aya. So this is one of these really problematic setups that mid-range Shaman can sometimes get pigeonholed in.
I mean, one of the really awkward things here is not only does he overload himself and keep him off of Aya for next turn, he's also overloaded and can't say Lightning Storm plus Maelstrom Portal. So even if he does soften up these minions, which is kind of his intent here clearly by playing the Feral Spirits to get attacked into, this Power Word Shield and now a Talon Priest, this is a 5 health and 6 health minion in play, and at best DocPwn can cast 2 Maelstrom Portals or just a single Lightning Storm.
And, interestingly enough, I think this is all Dragon Priest really needs in order to kind of lock Shaman out of the game, assuming that board doesn't get swept away with one big AoE, like Devolve, Lightning Storm, or anything equivalent to that. Because you have tempo now in your favor. It's any minion that your opponent plays, you can Shadow Word Death or Shadow Word Pain it. And DocPwn's playing a list that's especially vulnerable to Shadow Word Pain because of things like Alakir and because of things like Thunderbolt Valiant.
And yeah, Maelstrom Portal, 1 to your team, go. And that's gotta feel really bad. He is just so far behind. The Defender of Argus picked up. Interestingly, LvGe's hand pretty bad too at this point. He's got all reactive spells when he really wants to be pushing the issue. He is able to play Defender and heal one of his minions, so can keep up a pretty significant board presence here. But he's also kind of in a position where he wants to remove DocPwn's minions, so he's not necessarily pushing a ton to face. The Shaman deck, as we've mentioned several times, relies pretty heavily, or at least can benefit pretty heavily by being able to establish and protect a board. So LvGe's got to be thinking about, okay, well, do I kill the totems if he has Thunder Bluff? Do I kill, everything because maybe he has Flame Tongue? And trying to figure out how can he remove things and preserve as much health on his minions to prevent an AoE from being devastating.
Yeah, that play by DocPwn to Maelstrom Portal and not even get close to setting up for Lightning Storm is extremely suspicious. All right, 7 mana is the Thunder Bluff turn, ideally for the mid-range Shaman if they're able to set up a board. And, LvGe has a really big board of a lot of health now. But if he gets the spell damage totem, does he have enough to potentially wipe the board?
If he does get spell damage, he can get a high roll on the Lightning Storm.
Yeah, if everything went the max amount of damage, he actually would be able to remove everything. That's still a very optimistic scenario. It looks like DocPwn, just, again, being forced to hold Aya this long, or in this case, DocPwn's kind of choosing to not play Aya.
He could have played Aya that turn, but decided that the chance of getting the Spell Power Totem was really his best way to get back into this game. He knows that LvGe has spent several turns doing very little, so he can easily imagine that LvGe probably has reactive cards like Death and Pain in his hand.
Yeah, you know, LvGe just went for the very obvious play that he's going to do almost no matter what. Shadow Word Death first. You have 2 of in your hand. That is one of the highest attack minions in the mid-range Shaman, so go ahead and use that. From here, he's just trying to figure out what's the best trades to set up and what's the optimal health, so that way you can play around area of effect, because it's very obvious your opponent's holding some cards. He's been having some cards at the beginning of the game, hasn't played it. Back-to-back suspicious turns of Maelstrom Portal Pass, and then Think from Below with 4 remaining mana.
Right.
This has got to be a very suspicious play in LvGe's mind. There, he's just
There's another Lightning Storm. So 2 Storms and a Maelstrom Portal available. So DocPwn can try to go for the Spell Power again, or just cast both Storms and hope those do enough damage between them to help clear off this board.
Yeah, and he can't really afford to use his health as a resource anymore. Can't really buy too much time. He's at 13, and there's lethal set up on the board.
And because he does have the 1/1 in play, he doesn't even need to double high roll on the 7 health in order to kill it. He can get middling results on 1, a sort of an average result between 2 Storms, along with the Maelstrom Portal, and actually get a full board clear.
Yeah, well, he's just going to go for the Lightning Storm.
Got to start somewhere.
Yep.
Storm number 1.
So he's not going to even rely on any totems. It's only 1 and 4. Gets 3 on the Azure Drake. It's helpful.
Yep.
If he can get another 3, he can clear off the Azure Drake without having to use the portal. And he does!
All right.
Well, there you go. Now you can bolt. Yeah, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Yeah, that's all you need to do.
But that was a lot of resources that DocPwn just expended. And now a dragon picked up for LvGe, so it is operative time. And that's... Jinyu is probably the best of these, just as a standalone body.
Yeah.
He has very substantial minions himself, so doesn't really need to take something like Flame Tongue. Every single threat he plays is already pretty meaningful.
I'm feeling good about the Jinyu Water Speaker because it's just a lot of health on the board.
Right.
Shaman's double overloaded, so they have 5 mana, so they can't hex both of these minions. One of them is connecting to the face, and I think being able to pressure to your opponent is really valuable. Looks like LvGe still a little bit wary of what DocPwn's able to do for 4 mana. Excuse me, the Lightning Bolt also has overloaded that. And, you know, maybe DocPwn has a little bit of time to breathe here. He's got some high value. He got some of the highest value cards in his deck.
Oh, that was a great draw. I mean, LvGe already had the answer to
Right.
the Jinyu. He had the 2 copies of Shadow Word Pain, and frankly, he could have played the Jinyu, or played the Jinyu plus Shadow Word Pain to kind of have a Bookworm effect, but now he gets to actually develop the Jinyu alongside the Bookworm, so lots of threat on this board. And DocPwn, he's used both Lightning Storms. He does not have meaningful board clear from this point on.
Taunt helps him relieve some of that pressure, but I don't know if Alakir and Maelstrom Portal can just hold off everything, especially considering that LvGe has Shadow Word Death.
Was Holy Nova just lethal? I think Death plus Holy Nova is just lethal damage here.
Looks like it. Yeah, that's actually 15 damage. So LvGe going to take gate number 1 very commandingly, getting onto the board. And turns out double Shadow Word Pain, double Shadow Word Death is not that bad of a hand if you have a big board.
Yeah, I mean, that game really kind of was textbook from Dragon Priest against mid-range Shaman. He just got the board early, never gave it up. DocPwn struggled a little bit from having such a reactive hand and such situational reactive cards very early on. And just really was never to get a foothold at all.
One of the things that we want to call to attention to is that both the Americas and the Chinese players are 3-3 in their series. Being able to get a win here for either would put their region in positive wins, and also, of course, get to them to quarterfinals. So this is a huge match, not just for themselves, but also for the region that they represent, Brian.
Yep, and you know, we did see the other regions involved. We actually saw Europe fall from a sort of perfect score to pick up a couple of losses already this morning. So we'll see how the rest of that plays out later today.
All right, well, LvGe off to a very good start in game number 1. Let's learn a little bit more about him as we get ready for game number 2.
My battle tag is LvGe, which translates to Donkey Pigeon, or Donkey Brother. Back in the day, all my friends called me Donkey, so my battle tag used to be something like a long donkey story. Unfortunately, it was too many characters to fit on the screen during games, so when I joined my current Hearthstone team, I had to change it. But then it came to me. I'll shorten my name to Donkey Pigeon. Pigeons have special meaning in China, so I like that. Also, pigeon and brother are pronounced the same, and I really like that. So now my battle tag means both Donkey Brother and Donkey Pigeon. It's a play on words.
Do you know what a pigeon means in Chinese culture at all, Brian?
You're asking me?
I don't know, maybe. Brian, you know everything.
I do not know that.
Well, apparently it has a bigger symbolism. I'm not exactly sure, but a quick Google search said it was banned during the Cultural Revolution.
Whoa.
So maybe
he is controversial.
Yeah, it's controversial. We'll see, man. LvGe, a little bit on the cute side of things. He's very playful. You can see it in his interviews, saying that his username has a lot of funny origins. He was also approached by a fan, a female fan, to give Pavel a gift on behalf of her, and he got very jealous. He said, where's my gift? And she says, no, it's for Pavel.
Maybe that was the inspiration to take down Pavel in their match earlier today. He's like, oh, if I can take down the world champion, maybe I'll get his fans.
Well, he did say that he messaged her, and she said, you know what, congratulations on your win. Yeah.
All right, well, we are getting into game 2 here, and LvGe looking to make some more fans if he can advance over DocPwn here in the upper bracket. And Jade Druid versus the Jade Shaman. I'm like, Jade, wait, I said that one. That Jade, the other Jade. Lots of Jades. We'll have some big golems in this game for sure.
Well, at least for one side. I mean, DocPwn does have available of building up his big board, but LvGe, we'll see if he's able to pair together a big Jade run. A lot of times, mid-range Shaman is not super dependent on the Jades until maybe the late stages of the game, primarily because they're just trying to make sure to dissect the board and leverage tempo. Flametongue Totem, for example, can be even more powerful than just building up the Jades and using that as your primary game plan against Druid.
Yeah, the onus to be aggressive here is really on LvGe because, as you mentioned, the Jade Druid deck has far more late-game power. It makes more Jades, bigger Jades in general because of the ramp it has access to, as well as kind of the infinite Jades available through Jade Idol, especially in combination with Auctioneer. Though it's worth noting, DocPwn is not playing the Auctioneer. He's playing a copy of Yogg Saron Hope's End, which, if LvGe is to get a big lead, can potentially snatch that right away.
Yep. Yeah, Yogg Saron, of course, making some cameo appearances, still having an impact on series. And I think some people are, they kind of miss him. I see the occasional message once in a while saying, you know what, I kind of miss Yogg Saron.
Dude, I miss Yogg Saron. Come on. I miss Yogg.
You have emotes dedicated to Yogg.
Several of them. Yeah. I got to post them on Twitter during the Mega Zero match. It was great.
We'll see DocPwn be able to deal with the Totem Golem pretty effectively. He's got the Feral Rage. He feels like if he plays Jade Blossom, he's investing damage into it. And he can just go ahead and use Jade Blossom into Druid the Claw and then the 6-mana minion.
Yeah, this sequencing works great for DocPwn because he's able to remove the Totem Golem. As you mentioned, he needs to stall LvGe. He has a stronger long game than the Jade Shaman deck. The Jade Shaman deck has a stronger early game and stronger interaction. It has access to Hex and board sweeping cards like the Lightning Storm and the Maelstrom Portal, which isn't very impactful in this matchup, but paired with enough spell power can end up being able to sweep even a relatively large board of Jades, and there's a Wrath of Air Totem.
Yeah, this is exactly what DocPwn was looking for. He's hoping for just a little bit of passivity from the Shaman, so that way he can now utilize a ramp. And LvGe does have a couple ways that he can set up here. Thing from below gets cheaper over turns, and it is a 5/5. It's very intimidating. It sets up for Azure Drake very nicely.
It does, though here he also has potentially the option to Jade Claws and Hero Power. That reduces Thing from Below to 3. Then he can Hero Power and Thing from Below again next turn. Okay. He's actually not going to, so this does develop a slightly wider board. It also kills the 1/1, which means that a swipe doesn't take out pretty much his entire board with the 1/1.
That is fair.
So the flashpoint of 5 damage is harder by a fair margin for the Druid to do because its removal effects essentially are stuff like Druid of the Claw and Swipe.
Yeah, you know, that when you put it like that, it does make a lot of sense. And I guess you can save Azure Drake for later on. You know, part of the reason why I like setting up for Azure Drake because of what your hand is showing. It's showing that you have a lot of ways to capitalize off of existing spell damage that stays on the board. Because you play Thing from Below, you protect Wrath of Air Totem, and then Azure Drake is harder to remove. And as a result, you can have some really powerful Maelstrom Portals and Jade Lightnings.
And this is a nice window for a valuable Maelstrom Portal.
It's true.
They're able to clear off several minions, and these are cards that are fairly hard to get value from sometimes in this matchup because the minions are so large.
Right. So no need to totem because you know that you got the best totem guaranteed. Pit Snake, very valuable in the face of a taunt minion.
It is, and he gets Stoneclaw Totem, which means that DocPwn does not have the ability to simply use his hero power to kill the Pit Snake. And Pit Snake now got a keyword, Poisonous, as of Ungoro. I think it actually has it nowadays too with the patch. But you know, now DocPwn can't just play a big minion. It'll just die to a single bite from that Pit Snake.
Man, that might encourage DocPwn to just play Aya, because you know it is a little bit annoying for your opponent to remove it, and Aya is a death rattle minion, giving you a lot of stickiness onto the board. I have to be a little bit wary of what your opponent's doing. He's clearly prioritized hero powering a lot instead of developing powerful tempo minions such as Jinyu or Jade Spirits. So it does feel like he's setting up for a big Thing from Below turn. The way Druid can counter that is to set up a big swipe in response, usually spell damage. And this is primarily why players like Firebat really love Blood Mage Thanos in their Jade Druids, because they love the ability to swipe. I think they have since rotated out. I think most Jade Druids run Druid the Claws and Ancient Wars instead. So if you can get to that point of having a swipe swing turn, it usually decisively puts the tempo in your favor to the point where Shaman can't recover, because then they can't leverage Flame Tongue Totems and in some cases Thunderbolt balancing into their decks.
Yeah, and DocPwn going all the way to the rope here, figuring out what he wants to do. It looks like he's going to default to Aya because he doesn't have much time to mechanically do anything else.
Yes, yes. So while you might feel like tempted, man, this is a big board, and you know, swipe can remove it, I think he has better opportunities in the future if he saves it. As you can see, Palmblad's in the crowd. He just wants to play, but he has to wait till whenever his next match is. I actually don't know if it's tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had you know, a lot of the players have gotten to know one another who may not necessarily have met before. So definitely a lot of camaraderie here in the Bahamas.
Yeah, I wonder who he's cheering for. If it's you know, fellow Asian continent Chinese player, or maybe he's made friends with DocPwn. Who knows? LvGe gets the healing totem.
Well, that was the only totem he didn't have. So.
Right, so it's pretty much committed to this portal.
Ooh.
Sets up an old friend. Haven't seen him in a while. Small-time Buccaneer, all but disappeared from most lists, and has a really good opportunity to set up Totem Golem with Thing from Below. That's a commanding turn. It does make him pretty vulnerable to an Azure Drake Innervate Swipe, but you know, unlikely from your opponent to have that. It's a 3-card combo, and you're not really playing around 3-card combos specifically from Druid these days. You're playing around their ideal turn 7, which is Ancient of War.
And yeah, we talked about the possibility to play this Thing from Below way back when, several turns ago, but LvGe has managed to get it all the way down to 0 cost. So you know, a huge tempo advantage here for the Chinese player. DocPwn, he does have swipe.
He does. And because of how much LvGe has committed to the board, in his mind, DocPwn must feel like if he can just swing the board once decisively, he'll be back in this game and potentially just win, because he's got Nourish, he's got 2 Druids of the Claw to help control the state of the board or taunt up, and he's also got, you know, of course, late game value in Jades. So, you know, in DocPwn's mind, he's just trying to see if he can soften the board and cross his fingers that he's not just going to get pummeled by Flame Tongue Totem or a powerful card like Jade Lightning.
Yeah, it's important to note that LvGe does not have Bloodlust in his deck, which obviously DocPwn knows. Ooh, there's a Flame Tongue Totem picked up, though. And with this big board, plus Jade Lightning and Lightning Storm, there's a lot he can do to punch through this entire board.
Yeah, you know, this is one of the longest games, or the games where I've seen Azure Drake stay sidelined for quite some time here. You know, usually Azure Drake's one of the MVP cards in any kind of mid-range battles. And LvGe says, I can just accelerate the tempo by using Flame Tongue Totem and my Jade's removal spells. And Azure Drake can refill if I need.
And he also has Azure Drake into Storm next turn, though most of the minions that DocPwn would play at this point are going to be out of even Azure Drake's Storm range, I have to think that DocPwn has to be looking at that swipe and thinking, okay, I may have to finally pull the trigger on this turn.
Yeah, but how do you even swipe? There's so many targets that swiping the Totem Golem has argument because it's the Flame Tongue Totem positioning.
Right,
swiping
you end up, if you swipe the Totem Golem, then there's only the thing from below, Flame Tongue, and the Jade Golem remaining. If you swipe the Flame Tongue, then there's no Flame Tongue, but you're still dealing with the big thing from below as well as the Totem Golem. It's just not many options. Right. DocPwn hasn't really had a chance to ramp very much this game. I believe he only played a single copy of the Jade Blossom, so he isn't really able to take advantage of these multiple big cards in his hand. Druid of the Claw, kind of rotting there. He hasn't really had any chance to spend that mana.
He's just trying to see if he can play the biggest minions possible and go, but he's leaving Flame Tongue up, which gives him really good trades. And I mean, does LvGe have an opportunity to leave his opponent here?
I think with Azure Drake plus Lightning Storm, he can attack the small time in, and I think this is going to be 7, 12, 14. Yeah, it's exactly lethal damage once the Stoneclaw moves over, or the Flame Tongue rather moves over, and LvGe up to a 2-game lead over DocPwn.
Very fast. DocPwn not able to keep up with Shaman's tempo, and that's kind of what Jade Shaman is, really able to do in this matchup. Is Jade Golems got up to a 2-2.
Yeah, it wasn't even playing Jade.
It wasn't an impact at all.
Right, he was playing a totem game. He was just playing hero power, and that one big turn when he got the thing from below down and the Totem Golem down in the same turn, when he just kind of been trading things with DocPwn, and then the Flame Tongue Totem just really swung the game in his favor.
Right, and you gotta kind of wonder, did DocPwn just kind of take the damage for granted, so to speak? He was playing a little slow, just thinking that maybe I ramp up my J's and try to see if I can win over the value game, but Shaman doesn't really have that plan, especially if they're pushing with Thing from Below and Totem Golems with Flame Tongues. It gets nasty really quick.
Yeah, there was the one turn where he played Aya. He played the Aya into a board that already contained a Pit Snake. And maybe he needed to swipe that turn. Maybe he needed a swipe which removes the Pit Snake and maybe kills the thing from below with his hero power, instead of playing that big minion that was largely going to get wiped out by a lot of what was already in play.
Yeah, we mentioned so much about the spell damage swipe and how valuable it is, but that also could be a trap if you feel like you need to save it, but then all of a sudden you die before even getting to assemble the combo. And you end up just falling behind, and now DocPwn is down 2 games. He did say he felt like he was unfavored. I wonder if how he's feeling now, if he feels like, man, I must have no chance if it's going according to expectation here. Because a lot of players, a lot of Hearthstone players, they tend to be pessimistic, not to disappoint themselves in case they feel overconfident.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important situation when you're actually in a match to not get really despondent and think that, okay, things are basically already over. I've already lost. And it's a very easy mindset to fall into when you fall behind in a series. And it takes sort of serious mental fortitude to be able to crawl back from a significant deficit.
All right, well, here we go. Jade Druid versus Reno Warlock. DocPwn has to at least gain some confidence against this matchup. However, LvGe does have a pretty good fighting chance. He has the Leroy Jenkins and Faces Manipulator game-ending damage. Has Mountain Giant, so well fitted for the matchup, as best as you can be, reasonably.
Yeah, generally speaking, this is a matchup where the Warlock needs to be proactive. They need to play their sort of 4-cost minions, essentially. The Twilight Drake, the Mountain Giant, which usually costs 4 around that point of the game when you're life tapping, and put the pressure on, because the long game, the Druid is not going to run out of threats.
Yep. Well, I mean, this is one of the things that people don't really talk about, too. Draxus was the original, quote, control killer card prior to Jade Idol coming in and, as a result, blasting people on ladder. Draxus summoning a 6/6 every turn is actually a late-game win condition against Jade Druid if you're able to get it down safely. Say a Doomsayer with Twisting Nether sets it up.
I'm just looking at the hand. Did LvGe keep Reno?
I remember Kazakis.
There was that. I thought there was Kazakis and Reno both in his opening hand, which is surprising to me because I feel like this isn't really a matchup that's about Reno, and think that he would probably be better off digging for those more proactive cards and not giving DocPwn the time to get things big. Because this is a matchup where, yes, obviously being able to restore your health to full can be powerful, but if you're far enough behind that you are playing Reno and desperately trying to stay alive, you're often too far behind to really come back in the matchups well.
Well, seems like LvGe is assembling quite the team here. Just needs to figure out how he's going to best time his Kazakus. We've seen some people save it. We've seen some people play it very early, because one of the ways you can also beat Druid is not necessarily in the late stages of the game. It's also through sheer board control and really overwhelm the Druid before they can get set up. And your opponent only has been playing ramp, so to speak, being able to set up the Azure Drake and the Jade Blossom. Maybe this is your opportunity to try to use a Kazakus potion early. In this case, he doesn't feel confident just yet. Just going to go ahead and tap, find more answers.
Huh. Yeah, LvGe spent turn 2 tapping rather than playing this Swamp. He was definitely looking for some of those bigger threats. But yeah, he's far behind in the tempo here. The Azure Drake's going to get to attack and then probably see a Jade Blossom, or rather Jade Behemoth. Jade B, that one, set up here as well. DocPwn could even use Innervate if he really wanted to put out a Jade Idol as well, though I seriously doubt we'll see that.
All right, well, DocPwn introduced with a little bit of a tricky turn here, and says that he actually doesn't get much time to practice. Not exactly sure how he's been able to get this far without practice. Maybe he's underestimating himself, but this is what he had to say specifically about that topic.
His weakness is I don't have much time to practice. Compared to the other players, I'm sure they're putting in much more hours. I can play 2-3 hours a day and maybe more sometimes, but it's not as big as an amount as they do.
Yeah, it is true. Some of these players, you look at a fellow America's region representative, Frozen. He said he sometimes played 36 hours straight, and it's like, whoa, that is way more practice than 2-3 hours a day.
That doesn't even seem useful, playing 36 hours in a row. But DocPwn actually there took the most powerful play he could make here. He decided that he wanted to innervate out the Ancient of War and play the Jade Idol. This is going into the turn 5, or rather the 5-mana turn for LGVE here. If he did have one of his spot removal spells, like Blast Crystal Potion, he'd be setting himself behind in mana. If he had Siphon Soul, he'd at least need to be using the coin here. So, DocPwn has a firm grip on this board, and LvGe, with just a Twilight Drake here, does not have much he can use to contest it.
Yeah, I think DocPwn senses a couple things here. One, LvGe has been tapping a ton. And when Arena Warlock taps a ton, doesn't drop before, and saving the coin, they might be looking to drop an Emperor Thorson this turn.
Sure.
So if you do, you can leverage cards like Feral Rage, and then, or even Mulch perhaps, if you want to use Jade Spirit with it, and build a board, make your case to try to pressure your opponent before you can go for big board clears, maybe even threaten to win the game. But that is an interesting take on the matchup, because Jade Druids tend to try to use inevitability to kill their opponents. But at the same time, Michael also recognized that Innervate was kind of rotting in his hand. As the longer the game goes, until he gets the Gadgetzan Auctioneer, there's no
isn't even an Auctioneer in his deck.
Oh, you're right.
He's playing a version with just Yogg-Saron. So this actually lines up very well, too, because he spent the mana to play the Ancient this turn. He already had Jade Spirit plus Mulch. He can play Jade Spirit here, make a 3/3, and Mulch the Twilight Drake, essentially removing both of the big minions. He could even trade his 2/2 in here if he wanted to even protect against, say, a Kazakus Potion getting a 4-mana AoE, though that's actually still quite a bit of mana away.
Yeah, so for up to 7 mana, I think the card of focus is Abyssal Enforcer, because again, your opponents had relatively weak turns, so you got to be thinking about what cards they've been holding. It doesn't seem like there's a very good way to play around it. No matter what you do, your opponent, you're going to be losing to Jade Spirit. But I guess the benefit is that if he plays Abyssal Enforcer, he's going to die, and LvGe,
the Mulch
card, not a big deal.
The Mulch put a card back into his hand, so he ended up burning a card. Shadow Bolt, not a huge swing, though it actually would be pretty good here. He could Shadow Bolt the Ancient of War, coin out the Hellfire, and leave just a 1-health Azure Drake if he had not burned that.
Yeah, but then you'd be at 11 facing an Azure Drake.
Still not a great situation. Yeah. Better than the one he's in.
You think this is cause for even Reno in this position?
I mean, he might have to. And this is sort of what I was describing when we were in the Mulligan phase. We were talking about the Mulligan phase, where it looked like LvGe chose to keep Reno. And in games where you feel the need to Reno early, such that you want to keep it in your Mulligan, I feel like you're just not going to win most of those games against Jade Druid.
Yeah, and you know, curiously enough, too, LvGe has been trying to save things like Kazakus for value and late game potential, but you know, Kazakus, even if you get something right now, won't be impactful.
Yeah, I feel like LvGe, you know, he kept his Reno, he kept his Kazakus. These are two of the, obviously the most powerful cards in the deck. But if you're going to keep Kazakus, if you're going to keep Reno, you need to keep your Kazakus and use it. You can't keep your Kazakus and then hope to wait until you can get a 10-mana potion. If you're going to do that, mulligan away. Try and find that Twilight Drake to play on turn 4. Try and find that Mountain Giant to play on turn 4.
All right, so DocPwn finally gets, you know, why LvGe feels like he can take it really slow. He sees Reno Jackson. Maybe that's his cue to be a little cautious at this point, because before I think he was sensing some weakness in the deck and the hand and was trying to pressure it, but now he's walking into turns from this point on that he can be twisting Nether, which means that if he has no good way to refill the board in his hand, he could be completely gassed, which is another way Reno Warlock can win this match.
Yeah, that's what he's really scared about at this point, especially because LvGe still has the coin. So LvGe may only be going into a 7-mana turn, but coin makes Twisting Nether available, and DocPwn's hand, yeah, it's pretty light. He doesn't have any real reload here, with the exception of the 2 Jade cards. But if he does play another Jade card to this board, he could potentially be overcommitting. And if there were a Twisting Nether that comes down, LvGe may be able to recover from that point. At the same time, needs to be putting on enough pressure that he doesn't just give LvGe the time to find a Twisting Nether or to find other board clears.
Yeah, he'd be setting up 6 extra power, and by our count, that's setting up for lethal.
Right.
Now, of course, in his mind, his opponent's played very suspiciously, tapping on 4, no Coin Emperor, not even any kind of AoE like Shadow Flame or you know, piecing together Hellfire Demon Rats. Some of these combos used to tend to come out here in this position. LvGe finally reveals that he's been holding Kazakus, and now here's a bigger question. What mana costs he can go for?
Right. You know, this is the point where you sort of have to wonder. He can't even play a 5 this turn. He is at 7 mana with the coin. So he's Kazakusing, and this Kazakus cannot have impact this turn. And he can play a Bruiser, but that doesn't absorb that much damage.
He could try and invest into resummoning minions and fighting back for tempo. He did have a Reno die, and if this, assuming the secondary Bruiser goes down, which most likely it will, he can put that into the pool as well.
Right, well, looks like Fandral plus Feral Rage here is going to punch through the Bruiser, and that's 11 that DocPwn has the ability to push to the face here. He could actually also potentially trade or attack into the Kazakus to present a 4 damage AoE from clearing off his Ancient of War. And I think that's what he's pausing on his Azure Drake attack with. He's thinking, would I rather push the damage here or rather protect from the 4 damage AoE? Decides he'd rather protect from the AoE because he just saw the Kazakus. Mind Control tech.
Hey, you know, if you Mind Control tech and steal Fandral, you actually can activate both aspects of Keeper of the Grove. What a weird time to see the ability to combo while
He
Fandral.
could silence the Ancient that's already lost most of its health.
Yeah, and deal 2 damage to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, looks like that's not going to be the case. LvGe is going to try to get that taunt minion back and clear off a couple of these minions. You know, part of the problem is also the fact that he's at low life, so if this doesn't work out well, he could end up getting killed here.
Gets a reasonable stats worth of minions here. There's still 8 on the other side. You can see coin into maybe even Faceless Shambler. I was gonna go ahead and kill the Fandral. Wants to prevent maybe a Nourish coming down to give DocPwn not only reload but make it cheaper.
Yeah, you know, I thought he was going to Hellfire first and then go for it, but I think he doesn't want to be at too low of a life because at 9, it is risky for Drew the Claw and swipes and River Feral Rages. We did see 1 Feral Rage being used. It's unlikely, but
so leaving this Ancient up is just as bad as having cast Hellfire here. You're taking 5 from this. You actually are going to be lower if you leave the Ancient up than if you cast the Hellfire first.
Yeah, that's true. Jade Behemoth just very slowly applying pressure here, but it's still not that significant because your opponent does have a reasonable board.
DocPwn does have a Jade Spirit here, which would make a 5/5.
But you can't even reasonably clear the board either, so you kind of be playing directly into any kind of AoE. You did see a Kazakus potion, so at least you're not worried about that. Seems like he's just going to hero power and try to see if he can set up a pressure point where his opponent buckles and he maybe just win off the top of his deck.
Well, here, I mean, now actually LvGe, he can attack into the Ancient and the Behemoth and drop Jiraxis. That will heal him all the way up to 15 and perhaps start a comeback.
I don't see anything wrong with that. The fact is, your opponent Jades are at 4-4.
He can't actually clear the board. Oh no, he can't quite clear the board. He's 1 damage off being able to clear the board here.
But still effectively being able to get a safe Jiraxis down. And your Jades are about the same as the Infernals.
And I wonder if DocPwn has been a little too conservative here. You know, he still has a Behemoth. He still has a Jade Spirit in his hand. You know, obviously attempting to play around things like Twisting Nether or perhaps Mind Control Tech. But here, you know, now he's just allowed Jiraxis to put him very much in the back foot.
Yeah, I think Reno may have made him complacent because he felt like, well, his best healing option has been thrown out the window, but Jiraxis is one of the closing ways you can win. This is why a lot of people say this matchup is not nearly as one-sided as people said. That's why the data shows that Reno Warlock wins anywhere from 40 to 45% of the time against Druid, which is far more than popular convention.
Yeah, lots of people seem to think, oh, it's a control deck. It's going to lose to Jades. Well,
the original control deck killer, Jiraxis, heir to Lord of the Burning Legion, is now going to summon 6/6 Infernos every turn, and the LvGe has ways to even capitalize on that tempo. He's got you know, Leroy Jenkins Face Manipulator for the combo, but even just using Face Manipulator as another 6/6. How does Jade Druid fight against that?
It's very difficult. Jade Druid is very good at beating removal spells. It's not nearly as good at beating just an endless stream of big minions. In fact, it's not that great against big minions at all.
Looks like DocPwn still just going to layer his threats. Oh, he picked up Jade Idol, so he can squeeze that in as well. One final action. Didn't actually quite catch that. Looks like he just summoned a 6/6. Ooh. 2 cards remaining.
And you know, this is one of the risks of trying to play around so many things. DocPwn tried to play around Twisting Nether forever, and that gave LvGe the time to draw Twisting Nether. And not only draw Twisting Nether, but draw Twisting Nether when he can also use the Jiraxis hero power to make a 6/6.
Yes. Really, really powerful there. You know, I did want to hesitate and think about maybe tossing a Dirty Rat, but with 2 cards, it does seem unlikely that you're able to drag a worthwhile minion out. We know, of course, that'd be super devastating, taking away the Jade Spirit. But then again, you couldn't set up his own Inferno, so it would have been a win and a loss in certain areas.
Yeah, now DocPwn in a bit of a tough spot. You know, he has actually very nearly lethal damage from his hand with Druid of the Claw plus Swipe, and he is able to generate a pretty strong board with the Jade Spirit, but you know, now LvGe in the driver's seat with those Infernals, and even has taunts that he can set up too. He has the Dirty Rat, as you mentioned. He has Faceless Shambler, so the charge from Druid of the Claw is a lot less threatening.
Yeah, and if I'm DocPwn, until Nourish comes to the hand, I think I have to play very pessimistically. I'm going to have to Druid the Claw charge, or actually, I guess optimistically, depending on how you look at it. Saying that maybe I charge the face and get damage in now, and try to see if I can rush my opponent down. I have a second swipe in the deck.
I think that's got to be the plan, and that's exactly what DocPwn does. He recognizes, okay, you know, I gotta get this in now.
And we know that LvGe's got a lot of ways to answer this, both in taunts and in just straight up removal. Dirty Rat feels pretty confident because his opponent just dropped double minions in this position. He's nothing on the other end. That's a good sign for LvGe. And he still has that Shambler. That Shambler has been tucked away for a while. Able to set up another 6/6 taunt and just potentially just run away with the infinite Inferno value.
Yeah, LvGe has a lot of tools here, trying to figure out how best to use them. He knows no minion in the opposing hand, so he's got to put him on something like Swipe or Wrath. But now it also needs to create this board that can actually defend him, because he is quite low. At now 11, actually, after using the Refreshment Bender. And now, he's quite likely going to hero power, I'm going to say punch down the Jade Spirit to keep the minion damage contained, or he's just going to go face.
A punch to the face indicates that he sees a line for lethal.
Okay, so he has
Leroy and faceless.
Yeah, if there's an Azure Drake here, that could be bad. Innervate is absolute air. DocPwn just totally out of gas, and I wonder if he just played this too slow. He kept playing around the AoE, And, you know, like, as you mentioned, may have seen Reno and been like, okay, you know, I can just kind of take things slow and not worry about these big heals. I don't need as much damage anymore. But took too much time. And now it's LvGe who is very much on the offense.
Yeah, he played for tempo. You know, we saw him play both Jade Idols for just the golem itself. He doesn't have that availability. He doesn't have Gadsden Auctioneer in his deck. What he can do is save that Innervate for Yogg-Saron.
Yes, it's true.
And, you know, sometimes...
Sacrificial Pact.
Sometimes Hero Power and Innervate Yogg-Saron can give you some other combo enablers that might help you get there. Eviscerates or Head Cracks.
But yeah, there's actually not a super clean removal for LvGe on this Jade Golem at this point. Just going to go ahead and Abyssal here. Puts him down to 7, so he's got to be a little bit scared because he knows at least a little bit of burn left in the deck, but not enough, I think. If there were, actually, there's no copies of Living Roots in DocPwn's deck, so...
Oh, wow.
There's Feral Rage. If this was the second swipe in the Feral Rage instead of Innervate and Feral Rage, that would be lethal damage.
Yeah, that's right. And now DocPwn is trying to calculate if he can even live another turn, because he knows that if he uses Feral Rage, he still might die. So he goes up to 25 health. His opponent has 6, 12 on the board, plus the weapon is 15, plus 12 is 27. So no matter what, DocPwn has been checkmated, and LvGe is going to go up 3-0. What could be the fastest series yet, or potentially a repeat of Omega Zero.
Yeah, don't speak too fast. we had the 3-0 earlier, and yeah, we see DocPwn. He knows this game is over. All LvGe needs is one more point of damage, and he has that by far.
And there you go. You know, DocPwn not able to utilize his list's full potential, and a large part has to do with the fact that he's missing cards like Gadsden Auctioneer specifically for slower decks.
And LvGe, though, managed to navigate what seemed like kind of an awkward game. You know, we were talking about the choice to keep Kazakus, the choice to keep Reno, and those kind of sat in his hand for a very long time. And he was able to turn the corner, but I think really it was largely because of the fairly passive role that that DocPwn took in terms of just really trying to play around AoE when ultimately it turned out he couldn't afford to.
Yeah, we see this happen a lot in just Hearthstone history, where if you're just very conservative and you try to play around too much, you end up just losing and giving your opponent too much advantage, because then they don't even have to have that card. You know, he plays around Twisting Nether, and his opponent was able to win the board back without it. So it just feels like if you're playing too passive, sometimes you just got to get more aggressive, and that's why a lot of players who are able to utilize that. That's why rogue players love those concealed decks, because you always feel like you find that one window of opportunity to flip the switch and win the game.
Yeah, I often like to just make people have it. A lot of times they want to play around this, especially in the sort of mid turns of a game where, yes, if your opponent has this specific card, maybe they blow you out. But especially in a Reno deck where they only have a single copy of anything, and it's not going to be a card they kept in their mulligan, they very often just don't have it, and that can give you the window to win.
Yeah. At the same time, I don't blame Doc for making those reads. LvGe had a very weird hand. He kept a couple of opening cards in his hand, didn't play them anywhere between turns 1 to 6, felt a little suspicious until he finally saw Kazakus, and then, of course, the Reno as well. And then we're going to go into game number 4. Could this be the sweep of the day? LvGe is going to go to Rogue, and DocPwn's going to turn to Dragon Priest. Is that really his best matchup against Rogue?
Well, there's a number of different philosophies in terms of what your goal is. If you are down 3-0 in a matchup and you need to win every subsequent game, you could say, okay, this is my best matchup, and I want to queue this and get my confidence back, or be able to get more time on stage. You could also just think, okay, I have to win every single game from here on out, so I'm just going to play my favorite deck. I'm going to play even what you think my worst deck is in the matchup, and get things over with.
Yeah, he does have Reno Warlock available him, as well as Jade Druid and Shaman. So I guess it's his pick of the litter box, so to speak.
I think that his best deck in this matchup is probably either Priest or Shaman. I think that he's likely to be an underdog playing either the Druid or the Warlock deck. So he's definitely got a very tall hill to climb in order to come back in this match.
One of the interesting tech cards in LvGe's deck for Rogue is the Berkeley Bully, and that happens to line up very well against Dragon Priest. And the fact that he's going to use counter for coin Tomb Pillager gives him that opportunity to potentially utilize that coin if his opponent happens to trade.
Ooh, Death is a great draw for DocPwn, though.
But you can also hold on to it for later, because he does have access to the coin. So if you didn't have Twilight Drake or Twilight Guardian, you could argue for that. I guess the thing about Shadow Word Death, though, is that it opens up your coin for Draconoid Operative the following turn, or Blackwing Corruptor if you need it.
It also just lets you keep pressuring your opponent here. You know, you get to keep attacking with these Twilight Whelps. And when you're playing as Miracle Rogue, as Priest, usually you are the one who wants to be aggressive. You're the one who wants to contain the duration of the game, because as it goes long, Auctioneer becomes a much bigger threat, and you'd rather that not become a factor.
All right, so if I'm LvGe, my opponent's not utilizing the coin. I think he wants the coin for a 5-drop. But at the same time, he might feel like the coin is not as powerful here versus later. But, I mean, DocPwn now has a lot of options at his disposal to utilize the coin here. Whether to save it, which doesn't feel like proper usage for it this turn, or he wants to play Blackwing Corruptor versus the Operative.
I think there's actually a number of plays here for DocPwn that are totally reasonable. I think just Twilight Drake and just go face is a totally reasonable option. His Twilight Drake has 6 health. He is able to save the coin to possibly play Operative the next turn, and then perhaps play Corruptor and Agent the following turn. Could also just play Operative now. If you pick up something like maybe Backstab, you traded one of your minions. Maybe you pick up a Sap and can, over turns, end up gaining a little bit more tempo advantage here as well.
It's true. I guess it is a little bit scary because your opponent has range of the coin. If you play Twilight Drake, you also give possibility for your opponent to have double coin and play Gadget's Hand Conceal. It is one of the scarier things, and without Dragonfire Potion, I'd be very afraid.
Ooh, I like Leroy here. Like I said, you're looking to close out the game. You're looking to put pressure on your opponent, and Leroy gives you that reach. And yeah, those Twilight Whelps, they're just going face, putting LvGe down to 20. This makes using LvGe, using his dagger to actually leverage killing some of these minions of DocPwn's a lot scarier, because if he just keeps getting that damage in, the fear of burst, obviously not much from the deck itself, but with that Leroy, that can really make him pay for that life loss.
So many options.
You know, I'm trying to look if there's see if there's opportunities for LvGe to even get aggressive here, but it seems like no matter what he does, leaving up a Twilight Whelp does complicate some of the problems. Because one of the big advantages of LvGe's situation is that he has a lot of explosive potential. Cards like Sap with the Questing Adventure usually sets up lose-lose situations for the Dragon Priest, but I'm not seeing it directly here. I mean, if he goes all in on something, it's easy for his opponent to pick it apart if he's only building up Questing Adventure to a 5/5 or even a 6/6 with Blackwing Corruptor can shoot it down. Not to mention that also there's a rogue card that was just discovered, which could be sabotaging him too.
And LvGe is going to trade this in, go for just the bully here.
Okay.
So this does make the board a little bit awkward for DocPwn, but I think he's just going to keep going face. I suspect that we will just see DocPwn continue marching on for damage here. He has 4 on board, puts him down to 11. If he just Corruptor's face, that's 8. And then he has Leroy for the win next turn. If one minion survives.
Yeah. Blackwing Corruptor does get eaten up pretty easily, but I think you just care about pressure at this point.
Kill him, get him.
Rogue's not going to heal either, so if you can, the closer you can get LvGe to 6 means that you just win the game.
Yeah.
Rogue's not going to taunt or heal. Assuming they don't swashbuckle or something.
Yeah. So many people ask, oh, how do you beat this? How do you beat this? It's like, well, the way to beat this is make your opponent dead. And yeah, DocPwn sees it. He knows, I'm just going to keep these Whelps marching to victory. Just 8 life left for LvGe, so if one Whelp connects next turn, Leroy Jenkins makes it lethal.
Doesn't look like that's going to happen, though. LvGe can pretty much put DocPwn on the defensive, at least for one turn. He's got Sap, he's got Eviscerate, he's got the Questing Adventure, and I'm sensing LvGe going to go for a big tempo swing of his own. But does he have enough time?
And is he going to make the read that, okay, I need to play around Leroy Jenkins? I have to kill everything.
It's only Leroy Jenkins.
It's exactly Leroy Jenkins is what he's scared of, coming out of DocPwn and doing that exactly 6 damage that makes leaving a Whelp alive game losing.
Yeah, and how far does he want to commit here, too? Because he has to be cognizant of Dragonfire Potion, because he's going to be making a trade with Berkeley Bully. And he could be playing straight into it. Maybe he needs to utilize a little bit more. Then Coin Sap, excuse me. Need to finish my thought. He coined Saps, he's at 5 on the questing adventure. He might have to consider something else.
Oh, he's going for it. He's protecting himself from Leroy Jenkins.
Yeah, and protecting himself also from Dragonfire Potion. Also trying to diversify the threats by utilizing Cold Blood on what looks like to be the Broglie Bully. In case he hits Shadow Word, or his opponent has Shadow Word Death. It's an intimidating board.
DocPwn just needs 2 damage to connect for Leroy Jenkins to be able to win the game. I think his play here looks to be 3 minions. He has Wormrust Agent, Twilight Whelp, and the Blackwing Technician he just picked up. But by playing all of those this turn, he puts himself in a position where LvGe cannot kill all 3 on board and gives him the highest chance of 1 connecting and Leroy winning the game next turn. And that's what DocPwn does. He spreads out in the board, and LvGe, again, needs to kill every single minion or Leroy kills him.
Oh, but he can. He can kill every single minion. And LvGe, does he feel like he has to go phase? Because this is where the rubber meets the road. You know, last turn you played around that damage. Your opponent doesn't have a 2-card combo, and you kind of need to start hitting the face in order to win the game. This is a hard decision.
It definitely is. You know, LvGe in the tank here. You know, last turn he sapped a 1-drop to get to this point. Will he keep up that same plan and just keep attacking into every single minion every single turn?
Yeah, you gotta think, if I attack face, I have 17 damage to follow up. He opponent's at 22. It sets up a potential Leroy out. It's so tempting, but he's got to trade,
Oh,
and
he
he
does
makes it. He plays around the stolen Leroy.
I love it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the only play that's correct in this situation. And DocPwn still digging for answers.
And Netherspite Historian, that does not threaten lethal damage. That's a minion he can leave up. None of these are playable. Chillmaw represents at least a minion that can guaranteed kill something on the board, if the Broglie Bully, for instance, next turn.
Yeah, but I don't know if that's his concern here. And this is one of those few scenarios where you actually kind of want things like Fairy Dragon and Twilight Whelp, so you can flood the board.
Yeah, Twilight Whelp would probably be the best thing for him to get here.
Yeah. Crusher is also very threatening because you set up a 9/9, but I think Chillmaw might be the best answer because at this point you might be shifting your plan to just trying to drain the Rogue of resources, because if you can just eliminate this board one time, just sweep it out from the Rogue, then most likely LvGe won't be able to refill and pressure for the win.
Yeah, LvGe's hand is empty. He does have a draw coming from Blood Mage Thalnos, so that gives him a little bit more to refuel here. But yeah, it is Chillmaw that DocPwn selects, and Twilight Guardian comes down as a taunt.
And
prep is a miss.
Yeah, he's got another draw with the Blood Mage Thalnos.
And now I think LvGe is afraid of Dragonfire Potion. He's debating whether he can afford to attack his questing in without playing multiple additional cards to make it big enough to survive Dragonfire, or if he should trade his Broglie Bully in. He's going to maintain this board, though. Finds backstab, can't even play it.
Oh, and you know what, man? He's making all the right calls. Lovely Chuk has hyped this guy up a lot, and he's doing every single move correctly in such a tight position.
I mean, it was such a shocker to everyone when he beat Pavel. Is it a shocker now watching him as he's maneuvering these games?
The most winning player in China history is saying that this guy is better than him.
Yep.
So, I'm starting to believe it, man. And DocPwn just introduced with another awkward situation here. If he plays Chillmaw and his opponent gets a single sap, he could die. Because he knows his opponent's only 2 more cards, so you just sap, play a couple of cards, and Questing Adventure gets the job done.
And I mean, I think that from DocPwn's perspective too, okay, do I play 2 minions and then my opponent's in the same spot? He has to kill both my minions in order for him to survive next turn. If he plays Chillmaw, his opponent's Broglie Bully is guaranteed to die, but if his opponent plays any cards, he can have his Questing Adventurer survive even if he attacks the Historian into it. Kind of wants to go face with Historian here, I think. Because he goes face with Historian, plays 2 dragons. All right, he does go with the Chillmaw.
Yeah, Yeah, I think that's
interesting.
the only play that he can reasonably get because he loses to the same card both ways, and Choma at least guarantees Berkeley ability to die.
But if he attacks face with Historian, plays both small dragons, then LvGe actually has to kill everything on the board in order to survive the turn.
Here we go. Entomb, Shadow or Death, a lot of good cards could be.
Powered Shield.
Yeah, Power Shield! It keeps the questing alive and then some.
Yeah.
You know, actually, he's looking for sap and only sap at this point.
In order to actually get lethal this turn, it's true. Sap is his single out. All right,
Here we go. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Still
Master
room for
Spell.
Entomb. Master Spell, Silence.
Shifting Shade.
Yeah, you know,
That's another threat.
He played Operative against him. It's only fair. You split cards. 1-1's dying, a little annoying, but LvGe, even if the questing adventure dies at this point, he's within striking distance of Leroy. And you gotta wonder, you know, DocPwn has not removed this questing adventure for the longest time, trying to save it for game-ending damage, and at this point, things are way out of control. His best play is either a Nether Spite Historian, either taunt up, play a Nether Spite Historian to search for an answer, or search for a draw with Northshire Cleric by healing. This is really, really bad situation right now.
I think he played one Shadow or Death very early in the game to kill a Tomb Pillager. So there's a single copy of Shadow or Death that can actually kill this questing adventure at this point. Twilight Guardian, he loses to not only sap but backstab at that point because of the Shifting Shade. He's going to go digging, finds nothing useful.
Would he? I mean, there's also actually another line where he can Leroy Jenkins down the questing adventure, play Twilight Guardian,
it's true.
And hope that his opponent doesn't have a little bit of damage or sap to get past it. But it's clear that your opponent doesn't have the sap.
Yeah, I mean,
he's fishing for a Shadow or Death. Doesn't get it, and he has to play Twilight Guardian, and with backstab, that is it.
Wow,
LvGe is gonna take the series 4-0, and against all odds, somehow won this game.
Yeah, that game was really, really something. DocPwn was within a single Twilight Whelp attack of lethal Leroy damage. LvGe had to play around a stolen Leroy from his deck, a single card, and manages to pull off our first sweep of the entire championship.
Download complete. He knew that the only thing he could lose to was Leroy, which is, you know, unlikely because even though it's a 3-card discover, it's still not going to happen more often than not. And he said, in the only case where I die to Leroy, I'm going to make sure to avoid it at all costs and played around the most razor-thin edges in order to eke out that game.
And this was the turn where he had to not only deal with everything that his opponent had, but he was able to start that questing adventure on what turned out to be an absolutely epic quest. Got all the way up to, I think it was, 14 attack, 15 attack by the end. He's that adventure is ready for Ngoro and all the quests.
Yeah, well, he was the original person chasing the quests prior to all these hipsters and people using it in Ngoro. And LvGe is able to advance. He is the first Chinese player to go to the top 8. And a job well done. And again, we mentioned it a couple times that game. LvGe has received a lot of hype from his fellow Chinese players saying that he's the best player in China or he's the best player in the group. And I'm starting to believe it. He is going to the top 8. Still has to win one more game to go to the World Championship. I can't wait to hear what he has to say about it. He is waiting with Rachel for a few words on his victory.
Thanks so much, Jen. Like you said, he is the first player from China to qualify, and he is our first 4-0 sweep this week here in the Bahamas. So, LvGe, what do you think of that matchup and the fact that you were the first from China to qualify?
作为第一位晋级的中国选手，并且你这场比赛4比0，然后你现在感想怎么样？
现在晋级了，还是特别的开心。然后希望其他的中国选手也都有好运气，能够我们会师决赛。
I'm very excited that to be qualified, and I hope all the China players can have the good luck and we can meet together again.
Well, something else Dan mentioned, the other Chinese players, especially LvGe, seem to think that you are the most underrated player here. Why would they say that?
若基说你被低估了，在之前的采访中，你认为为什么会这么说？
可能就是朋友间的互相玩笑吧。其实我也经常说他们都很强，就大家朋友之间这样彼此都这么说。
We are just a joke with each other, and in our normal time, we will joke each other as well.
I don't think it's much of a joke that you are crushing it in this tournament. So congratulations once again, LvGe. I'm moving on. Next, we have a match with our current Hearthstone World Champion. Don't go anywhere.